The following is a conversation with Jihan Trembek. Jihan is a software engineer and the Cosmos Hub lead over at Informal. Informal is a software company that focuses primarily on the Cosmos Hub, and they're also the co-organization that proposed proposal number 187 to the Cosmos Hub community. That proposal might inaugurate a new era for the Cosmos Hub because it foresees the launch of replicated security, which is a shared security model for the Cosmos Hub. What that means for Atom delegators, validators, the value accrual, and the economic incentive mechanism for Atom is what you're going to be finding out in this interview. As I mentioned, from my personal view, I think it's a pretty substantial proposal to elevate the role of the Cosmos Hub, right? And like up until now, the Cosmos Hub has been in this state to bootstrap the Cosmos ecosystem, right? A lot of the app chains in Cosmos are now live. They have substantial traction, right? Osmosis is killing it when it comes to IBC traffic. So a lot of people are questioning, like, what's actually, do we still need the hub, right? Like, what's the point of the hub? What's the point of Atom? So my first question is, from your perspective, how do you view replicated security coming to the hub? Do you think that's a total, like a killer feature, killer application, or how do you view that and what it means for the hub moving forward?
Yeah, so replicated security is basically a way for the hub for the validator set and the stake of the hub to secure many other blockchains, which we call consumer chains. And these consumer chains can have any kind of application on them, and they all have the around $3 billion of stake of the Cosmos Hub securing them. So what that allows is for the Cosmos Hub to basically be like, it's like this opt-in is this thing where chains can use it if they want, and it allows the hub to put that stake to work, securing all these consumer chains. So I think the hub has been obviously, in the past it's been hasn't really had much of an application on it. But now this allows the hub itself to still not really have applications running directly on it, but to be used for many different applications within Cosmos. And so I think there's always going to be Cosmos chains. Obviously, not every chain is going to become a consumer chain. I think that's part of what has caused Cosmos ecosystem to grow a lot, is the fact that you do have, like, it's just basically it gives you a really good toolkit for making a blockchain. And so people interested in that are not always going to be interested in also, having security provided by a different chain. But chains that want that security, chains that need very high security, they have this option now to get that from the Cosmos Hub.
Can you explain, maybe for also an audience that is not familiar with this concept, how is replicated security architectured? I mean, it's outlined in the proposal, and I encourage everybody to read that. But I think most people, they just want to hear things. They're more trying to hear things on YouTube or on Twitter. So maybe for those that don't want to go through all the documentation, like, how is replicated security architectured, and how does it maybe differentiate to other shared security models that are in production right now?
Yeah, so what replicated security does is it basically sends every blockchain is run by a validator set. So that's these organizations running computers that validate the transactions on the blockchain. So on the hub, there's 175 different validators. And what replicated security does is it takes that validator set, the list of all the validators and their power, how much of a vote they have, and it sends those to the consumer chains. And then the consumer chains update their validator set using that. And so what that does is it makes sure that all those chains have the same validator set. And then the other thing that happens is that if those validators do something wrong, if they double sign, then they're slashed on the Cosmos Hub. So that's basically the outline of how it works. Some future designs of interchain security and shared security in Cosmos will be more complex. Like mesh security, for example, there's a little bit more moving parts. The validator sets are not always the same, but this replicated security it's very simple, and you know exactly what the security is you're getting. So it's very, very straightforward, very high level security when it's coming from the Cosmos Hub.
And I guess it's called replicated security because it replicates the validator set of the Cosmos Hub to also secure these consumer chains, which is basically, if you're coming from the Polkadot community, that's basically the equivalent to parachains, I guess, in the Polkadot world. But what's the overhead here, and how do you view that play out for validators? I see this concern sometimes from the community that validate, that's not going to work because the validators are going to mess it up and they miss upgrades. How has that been, and how do you think that's going to play out moving forward?
Yeah, so we're that is definitely, if there is a problem, it will be with upgrades, because that's where the most amount of work is. I think is keeping up with upgrades. So we're working with the validators. We're improving communications and making sure we have close coordination with them. But I think it's a valid concern. I think it's going to play out. It's not going to be a huge deal, but that's definitely something we've got our eye on. And yeah, so in terms of like the cost for validators, that's another concern that's been out there. And due to the overhead of Tendermint, most validators do end up spending around $200 to $500 running a server, which can validate a blockchain. And so if you think about replicated security, they're just running more of these servers. And so that can, it can add costs. And we think there's ways, I've been doing some research into ways to reduce those costs. One way is to kind of increase the amount of time a validator can be down before they're slashed, which that's something we can play with to make it so they don't need as much redundancy, so they can have only one server running instead of multiple for each blockchain. And so we're gonna take a number of steps like that. The other thing is that one of the updates to replicated security we have coming, not in this upgrade proposal, but hopefully pretty soon, will let some number of the smallest validators opt out. So the bottom 10 or 20%. And the concerns people have are around those small validators. Once you get to the 20% validator that is at like, the 80% of the power, right? So the 20 are below them. That's actually validator number 40 by number. So the top 40 validators are 80% of the power. And so once you're up there, I don't remember the exact numbers, but these guys are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And so spending, a couple $100 a month on an extra server is not going to be a problem for them. In contrast, like the bottom validator in the stack, number 175, they're making about, last time I looked, they're making around $10,000 a year. And so, divide by 12, it's like $800. So if you're, making them spend hundreds of dollars more a month, that could really be a problem. So we think that until that update comes out, we're not going to have that many consumer chains, maybe just a few. So I think it's not going to be a problem, but we are looking at ways to deal with that. And then, of course, future designs, such as opt-in security. So, what we were calling before interchain security v2, are trying to move more to descriptive names now. So opt-in security and also mesh security. They can allow for more optionality in which chains validators want to run. And so that's also a solution. But there's some additional considerations of how to make those things work that we can talk more about. But yeah, so we're definitely looking at both those issues, and we're staying on top of them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think another concern or thought is like, okay, we have these consumer chains, validators have these additional expenses, and they have to provide resources and also monitoring and all these kind of things. What would be an additional way to sort of economically incentivize them, right? And I know there's like some thoughts from the Neutron team, and I think also Stride. I think none of that is public yet. I personally always try to squeeze out as much as I can, which is hard. But what are some of the models, right? I mean, we talked about this, I think a couple of months ago, we did a deep dive on the concept of replicated security. Now there's a clear proposal, but we also talked about economic incentives and how Atom stakers would, like Atom validators and stakers would earn a portion of the revenue or the fees, whether that's application fees, transaction fees, or even emissions of consumer chains. So how do you view that, and what's the latest on that?
Yeah, that's another thing I forgot to mention in the basic protocol is the rewards. So on a Cosmos chain, there is something called the distribution module, and distribution it takes all the fees and then also inflation that's earned by validators, and it distributes it amongst the it distributes amongst the validator set and their delegators and stuff. And so what we do with replicated security is that the distribution module on the consumer chain, there's a configurable percentage. I've suggested 25% in the past, but I think that's going to have to be sort of decided in the context of each consumer chain. But let's just say 25% of the inflation and fees then get sent over IBC to the provider chain. And there they go into the distribution module of the provider chain and get distributed to the validators and delegators there. So that's how that works. So what that'll do is it makes so every, so people staking Atom for every consumer chain, they're going to get some of the tokens from that consumer chain. So they're going to be getting like a basket of tokens. So that's how we're thinking about that. Of course, there are more nuanced things. I think some of the stuff you were talking about there was there's some ideas to kind of give an extra little bit to the small validators, or give a sort of a fixed amount to every validator so that small ones get this extra amount. And I think that's just also kind of in the vein of making it easier for the small guys, because that's where the validator cost concerns come in, is for the small ones. So I think that if you look at my suggestion there of letting the bottom 10 or 20% opt out, it's kind of similar, because those guys will still get the rewards, but they don't have to pay for the hardware there. So I think between all those different things, we'll definitely be able to find a model that makes it work for the small validators. For the large validators, it's not a huge concern, because their rewards are going to dwarf what they spend in infrastructure.
Yeah, there have also been some speculations around consumer chains. I know there's a lot of discussions also about existing kind of app chains right now in Cosmos. Stride, I know they have already announced it. They actually announced it at Cosmos last year, but they are working on something. I heard also Comdex. I saw a tweet that Turbo put out. They're also exploring it. Can you talk about some of these like existing app chains? If you can name any, obviously that would be amazing, but also how that works, right? Like they have the existing validators, set, and I guess some of the validators are not validators on the hub. Like how does that transition work, and how does the economic incentive work for a token that's already in production on its own chain? Like how does that work?
Yeah, so the way it works is, so for Stride, for example, Stride is, I don't know what their market cap is right now, but they want to as a staking as a liquid staking provider, they will be holding a huge amount of staking tokens of other chains and deciding those chains validator sets. So that's the kind of thing where it would be a serious problem for a given, for a chain to have a lot of their staking tokens going into a chain with a much smaller market cap. It would kind of, honestly, I think, let's say you had the hub at $3 billion staked, but all that was being staked with liquid staking tokens on Stride that had like 100 million, let's say, in market cap. That would really, I think, effectively reduce the hub's security to 100 million, because, ultimately it would be controlled kind of by this chain with much lower market cap. So I think that's why, I guess you probably talked to Stride about what went into their decision, but that's a big reason for liquid staking providers to want to have really high security. And so replicated security can provide that. And the way the switchover works, Stride actually, the team is really great at Stride. They actually helped us build this. So my colleague Marius specified this system for switching over, and their team took it and they built it, and we're kind of reviewing their pull requests right now. We're going to get it in, so it's pretty cool. But basically, what happens is for validator sets on Cosmos chains, what they do is that every block they essentially sign something saying this is the new validator set. So it's like a succession. Every single block, it's like, the validator set's dead, long live the validator set, and they're handing over power. Of course, usually that's almost exactly the same validator set as before. But, with maybe some very small changes from someone undelegating or delegating or something. But that's how it is. It's this chain of custody. And the IBC updates works the same way. So other chains, when they're deciding whether they should trust a message that they get claiming to be from a given blockchain, they look at whether there's a light client update saying, hey, this is the new legit validator set. And then they look at the signatures of the new validator set. So they need to see that the old validator set has authorized, the new validator set to sign the messages. So, so when you get down to it, that's what you need to have happen for a switchover from one validator set to another. And so for turning on replicated security for a previously standalone chain, they need to switch from their previous standalone validator set to the hub's validator set. And so the way they do that is you just have it's kind of complicated to make it all happen. It's actually more complicated to make it happen than it is to explain, because it's just like moving parts. But you basically you install a module on the standalone chain, and that causes at a certain block the old validator set to sign over control of the chain to the Cosmos Hub's validator set, and that then starts getting updates over replicated security, and then it's a replicated security consumer chain. So that's how it works technically. And I'll also just say we don't have this written yet, but we're also working on a system for that to go in reverse as well, because we want to make it possible for consumer chains to switch over to being standalone chains at any time if that's what they want. But anyway, you might be wondering what happens to the old validator set then, because these guys, some of them are validators on the hub already. They might see their power change. They might have a different amount of power on the hub than they do on Stride currently. But some of them might not be hub validators at all. So, why are they going to want to sign over control of the chain? And the reason is because what happens is this is a little bit independent of the kind of the low level mechanism I described of signing over the control, but it's kind of it's another part of it, which is that there is on consumer chains, not all of them use this, but there's an option of using something called the democracy module, where you effectively have a validator set, but it's only used for governance. And so they're just not running that $500 a month server, but they still participate in governance as validators currently do. And so in that context, we actually call them representatives to be more accurate. But I'm pretty sure that's what Stride is doing. I guess they can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what we've talked with them about. What will happen is that their validator set when it switches over, they'll become representatives. And so the Stride token will be a governance token. It will be a token that is able to earn rewards from the liquid staking they do. They have I don't remember how it all works right now, but they have a pretty sophisticated kind of reward scheme. And those validators will still have all the token holders who have delegated to them, but they're then those token holders' representatives. And so that's how that's going to work, and that's why it makes sense for the Stride token holders and for the validators to switch over. And so really the only change that's going to happen is that those validators no longer have to run a Cosmos server to Tendermint server.
Can you share any alpha leaks around other existing chains that are exploring, or I'm sure like some of that stuff is not public, but Time made this tweet about Comdex. I was personally thinking, I also talked about this on my stream with Sunny and Nick from Celestia. Chains like Gravity Bridge that also have relatively high TVL to their market cap. Like, are there conversations with any of these Cosmos projects to potentially migrate?
Yeah, there are conversations. I'm probably not the best person. I honestly, I probably should be staying more on top of this, but I do leave that to Thyborg. He does the business development. So we're definitely talking with a lot of chains. I'm not completely I'm not completely sure beyond the next few that we have, where those conversations are. I wouldn't want to prematurely announce something. But yeah.
Fair enough. Then what about new consumer chains that are being built from scratch, right? We heard Neutron. There's also rumors, actually made a video about this, about the kind of native asset issuance chain for USDC with Noble. Then there's Duality. There have been a couple chains that were being thrown around. I think Neutron is pretty much confirmed to be the first ever consumer chain to launch if Prop 1.7 passes. And then on March 15, there would be the upgrade. So what can you talk about, tell us about the kind of like new chains that are being built from scratch, like optimized for replicated security, I guess?
Yeah. So like, there was Duality. I think some of these also aren't completely decided. That is what they're going to use. I mean, they're very new projects. They're kind of just like, exploring stuff. Noble as well. Noble is in our replicated security testnet. So they're very very conscious of security. So they definitely want to see another consumer chain or two go before they launch. But I wish I was better prepared for this. Honestly, I've been super heads down, focused on like shipping it. So I feel woefully unprepared to kind of speak about various projects and the states they're in. So.
Fair enough. No, I think that's good, and I think maybe in the future we can also make an episode with Thai. I would love to get him on also and talk about some of the stuff that he's been doing. But let's then talk about there's a couple of chains at least in the works. We all know that. Actually, also have a couple of interviews lined up with consumer chains or candidates at least. So stay tuned for that. But what about the evolution of replicated security? And in the proposal, it also says replicated security is part of the interchain security family. There's a kind of roadmap for it, right? You also dropped mesh security earlier, which is this concept that provider chains can also be consumer chains at the same time. The Osmosis and Juno team have been working on this also at Cosmos. They came up with a prototype. So what are your thoughts on this, and where do you see kind of the end game maybe for the Cosmos Hub shared security model?
Yeah, so we used to call everything interchain security. It was V1, V2, and V3, and then it became confusing because we'd sort of change our plans. We'd be like, well, now is this other thing V2, or you know what I mean? So it's kind of better to. So basically, the three main things that have always been sort of considered as part of interchain security are replicated security, first of all, then opt-in security. That's where validators can choose whether or not they want to run a given consumer chain, and that actually has a lot of similarities to EigenLayer on Ethereum in some ways. And then layered security. So layered security is basically mesh security. So those are kind of, and layered security is basically that you have the possibility for a given chain to have multiple different like the security of multiple provider chains. So whether that's like the chain having its own security and then also getting security from a provider chain, or providing security to its provider chain, or having a whole mesh or whatever, it's like that's kind of the concept there with mesh security or layered security. And I'll just say, I'll go back over these to explain them. But with mesh security, the innovation I think that Sunny brought in when he announced mesh security was that instead of having the validator set be kind of what you focus on, and having the validator set validating these different chains, you actually let people on those chains delegate to the different validators on other chains, which makes things a lot simpler to design in a lot of ways. So that was pretty cool. So that's the main difference between mesh security and layer security. It's just that innovation around having it be delegator centric. But anyway, replicated security, it's a whole validator set. So you can kind of think of it as multi-threading. So it lets one validator set run multiple chains. Pretty simple. And then opt-in security and mesh security. Those are things we're going to be exploring. Our team will be exploring in the next year. And right now, one of the things we're looking at is like whether opt-in security or mesh security can actually be secure without fraud proofs of some kind. So that's something I could talk about more. But actually, we wanted to talk about the slashing, right? Because that's something that came up
Yeah.
recently in the last few weeks. Yeah, so I'll give you some context for this. So when we started working on replicated security, it actually started before I was even involved in the project. But in those days, it wasn't that long ago, I guess, but it seems like a very long time in blockchain years. But there was, those gravity decks on the hub, gravity bridge. There was, they wanted to do the Cosmos Hub like name system, some kind of a name system. There were a lot of different groups modules, some kind of DAO framework and stuff. So there's a lot of the roadmap of the hub at that point was based around adding like all these different modules to it. And so that was a lot of the context of when we were working on replicated security in the beginning, was kind of according to that roadmap. And so some of the controversy around slashing that has come up in the past few weeks is the fact that when a consumer chain can basically tell the provider chain, this validator double signed, and the provider chain trusts that. And so we changed this, so it's not like that anymore. So now it has to also go through another governance vote to make sure it's legit. So that I think that's kind of put a lot of those concerns to rest. But you might wonder, why does the provider chain just trust the consumer chain like that? And the reason is that it's the same validator set. So the validator set, it's the same validators doing the same stuff. They're not going to unfairly slash themselves. And if they wanted to unfairly slash themselves for some reason, they could just do that directly on the hub as well. So the only way that someone can get unfairly slashed is if there's actually like exploit code within a consumer chain. And it's not just about there being, some kind of security vulnerability, like someone made a mistake. Like it actually has to exploit something that's known as a capability system to be able to forge IBC packets. So the risk of that is, relatively low. It's a lower risk than if the application on the consumer chain was just done as a module on the Cosmos Hub. So if you think about Gravity Dex or whatever, that's still it's not really running anymore, but still in kind of it's in the kind of state where people just withdraw their funds now. But when it was running, that was a module developed by a separate team directly on the hub. Gravity Bridge that never got onto the hub, that would have been the same thing. Interchain, name system or whatever, that's obviously the name of a different project now. But if there's a Cosmos Hub name system, that would have been the same thing. And so replicated security was like, well, let's take all of these internal sort of, or semi-internal Cosmos Hub projects and put them on their own chains for better scalability, fault tolerance, et cetera, et cetera. And so that was the thinking there. And I think that, in retrospect, probably if we'd known how things were going to evolve and that it was mostly going to become a platform for independent teams, we probably would have put more time into verifying the slashing conditions. But that's kind of where it came from. And I also want to address, you had Ethan on a Twitter Spaces a couple weeks ago, and he was like, oh, well, they told us in mesh security that you have to verify the slashing evidence, but then they're not doing it themselves. Like, what the hell, man? And so the reason for that is that with mesh security, it's a completely different thing. I mean, you have independent chains. I mean, they're selling this vision of like, there being like, 100 different mesh chains all connected in a big happy mesh. You don't want the possibility for every single one of those 100 chains you're connected to in this big mesh being able to like take your chain out. It's like it's a very different trust model. Instead of it being kind of like how replicated security was originally envisioned, being kind of like this almost like a subsidiary, or we used to call it child chain. It's actually like, if you have independent validator sets, you don't want a possibility for the validator set of Kujira to be like, hey, let's slash the hell out of osmosis, so it's kind of a different security model with mesh security, and that's why there's that distinction. But what we've done now, given that there were concerns about this, we made it so that instead of when the provider chain gets a slash pack of a consumer chain that says someone double signed, instead of just accepting it and slashing the validator blindly, it first has to go to a governance vote. And so there it can basically be voted on, and and it can be vetoed if it's not a legit slash packet. And so this is also something similar to actually the EigenLayer white paper just came out, similar to what EigenLayer does. So it's a good security measure. But we also have we also have our team, several of our team members have now switched over to working pretty much on getting that verification of the double signing evidence in as well, which is kind of not trivial. It involves some cryptography and stuff like that, but it should be possible. So hopefully in an upcoming update, we'll be able to bring that in and kind of take care of that.
You also mentioned earlier that the Stride team helped a little bit with providing input and the code and refining replicated security. Were there like other teams? Because I know like predominantly it's been you guys at Informal that worked on shipping replicated security. Were there any other teams involved in that or individuals to like ship the first version?
Yeah. So the let's see. So yeah, I think that the IBC team. So the IBC team at IG, which is kind of a subsidiary of the ICF. So the IBC Go team, especially Aditya, they worked on the original design, and then also in collaboration with people at Informal. This is actually kind of before my time, actually. And then there's also Haifa. So Haifa is they're a team that they specialize in test nets, kind of ops, and they've done a really great job. So we really depend on them, especially around deployments and stuff like that. But also they set up the incentivized test net. And then also I have to give credit to the Cosmos SDK team. They actually, speaking about that democracy module that lets the validators be representatives, they actually wrote a lot of that, Marco and Bez over there. So it's been a pretty collaborative effort, but the team at Informal has been kind of doing the bulk of the core work.
Yeah, I was asking because you brought up Ethan Frey, and I think in Cosmos we have this culture that there's a lot of sovereign teams working on different things, but sometimes like there's some information asymmetries, but that's also kind of reflected in this debate we currently have around funding public goods, right? That's also why I had Ethan and the Confere team on that Spaces in the first place. So what are your thoughts on that, and how do you view the landscape of development teams around specifically the Cosmos Hub and the situation about public good funding?
Yeah, I think obviously there's all this stuff about the ICF. People think it's not transparent enough and stuff. I think it's I don't know. I think there's definitely, I think the ICF could make things a lot easier for themselves. And I will also say that our team is at Informal is funded by the ICF. So, but also there's another question with the ICF, which is I think the bigger question people want to focus on. But the real question is the ICF in charge of just funding the Cosmos Hub, or is it in charge of like doing public goods to like advance the state of like blockchains, right? And so it really is the second one. So that's what the ICF has always done, is like funded stuff like Cosmos SDK, the IBC Go team, Tendermint, and stuff like that. So the Cosmos Hub has always been something that they have funded and that they have taken care of, but it's not like their main thing. And if you look at, especially like before, like this year and last year, the actual team at IG, which is a subsidiary of the ICF, devoted to the Cosmos Hub, was very small. It was like Billy and a few other people. So I think that's what the ICF's mandate always has been. I think there is room for debate about whether that's what it should be. I guess that's not a debate I'm going to get into right now, but I think it's very healthy and positive for the Cosmos Hub to be able to fund its own development. And that's what I want to see. I want actually our team at Informal, I would like us to be working off of a community pool grant in 2024. That's our goal. So, and I also think we also have some stuff we want to do around, making different governance processes that that work better, and stuff like that. So yeah, I think moving to community pool funding for Cosmos Hub development long term is going to be really healthy. But the question is, like, can the community pool responsibly allocate funds? And I think also, if the answer is no, then like, how can people complain about the ICF? Because like, if we can't allocate our own funds and we need someone to do it for us, like, then why are we going to complain about them? You know what I mean? It's kind of a paradox. Like, so basically, in terms of allocating funds, I think the current like community pool spending model lacks a lot of nuance, and it could be improved in a lot of ways, with kind of more nuanced types of proposals. And that's not the only thing. Of course, you need to have a culture that supports it as well. So you can't just, you know, do everything just by changing some code or whatever. But like, one of the things is that a lot of the funding has happened in the past. These are just my opinions too. I think that other people have different opinions about what needs to happen and stuff. But one of the things is that usually the way this stuff gets funded is that there's a spend that goes into a multi-sig, and there's like, you know, 3 or 4 people on that multi-sig, and it's like, just because we have these guys on a multi-sig now, it's now like accountable, you know? And I think that like, that's not always the case. I don't think that there's ever been any kind of like malfeasance in any way. But it's also not necessarily like the people who usually are on those multi-sigs are very busy people. And so it's not necessarily like they're able to really direct the work of teams doing stuff. So one of the things we're seeing now is like with the grants program, you have people paid full time to manage that and to keep teams accountable. I think that's really good. And another thing that in terms of mechanisms we can do for governance, one thing I'm interested in is like streamed funding. So being able to say a team is going to get this amount of funding. Obviously, there's difficulties doing that in atoms because of the price fluctuations and stuff. Maybe there's also ways to convert it to USDC or something first, or change the amount based on the price, things like that. But basically, with stream funding, you can give teams the confidence to say, we know we're going to get paid, but at the same time, we're held accountable because they're not getting it all at once, and they can't just like run away with the money or something. So I think that's going to be something that we're going to try to work on over the next year, is kind of helping get some more nuanced governance stuff in. And so like, you could have a thing, let's say someone's going to get $1.2 million over 3 years to do maintenance, and then maybe there's like, either that's like continuous and it can be taken away by another proposal, or maybe you make it so that like there's automatic proposals that happen every 6 months that say, do we want to renew this? And maybe it's like the threshold for, maybe it automatically passes unless it gets 1/3 no with veto. So it's more of like, it needs to be vetoed versus being approved every single time. I think there's a lot of nuance we can get into to kind of make it possible to fund teams in a more decentralized way. And so for the notional proposal, I think there are arguments for and against it, but I found just as an example specifically, right? So notional wants 120,000 atoms over 3 years to do maintenance, which was kind of where I was getting my example from there. And they're a very technically very skilled team and stay on top of things a lot. I think, you know, there's arguments for and against the proposal, but one of the things, I helped them write it, one of the things I had to put in there was basically like this vesting. So instead of it going into a multi-sig that just has some prominent community members on it who are going to, you know, just give them the money ever so often, it's actually in a vesting account. So it's good. The money will go into a vesting account. And then from there, if the notional team is not living up to their responsibilities, or if, let's say, the atom price moons to $100 and they still only got 2 people on it and it's way out of proportion of what they should be getting, you know, then you could have another proposal to adjust the amount, to cut it down, or to stop it. I think it'll be interesting to see whether that works, obviously, and whether it's kind of like an MVP of what we want to do with the stream funding, but it's just using a vesting account. But that's the direction I want to see things go in, is having kind of building these mechanisms to where the Cosmos Hub can fund its own work without having to give all this responsibility to some people running a foundation or granting committee or whatever, and depending on them to like do a good job and then complaining about them, so yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have so many thoughts on this. Maybe I think we should do a separate episode on that topic alone. I know we're running out of time, but just very quick, I think Proposal 88 was super important to increase the community tax from 2 to 10%. So that there's some natural revenue or cash flow for the hub community treasury. I do think we need some sort of system that has sort of like sub DAOs or whatever for developers, for business development, right? We saw Proposal 95 with the Atom Accelerator DAO. I think those type of initiatives where you also have a group of people that are maybe experts in that field, right? I'm also thinking, for example, about Cosmoverse. We also did proposals and we just always asked the entire community. But what if there was a sub DAO for conferences? What if there was one for hackathon? Developer onboarding? And maybe there's a way that the native issuance of USDC could also play a role, that you could denominate that in USDC and then somehow connect it to the Atom Treasury. I don't know how that would work on a product level. I'm not technical at all, so no clue. But just these ideas, I think, are important and to have these conversations. But yeah, I think that's maybe another topic for another session. As we wrap it up, Proposal 187 is on the hub. I encourage everybody to vote. For me, obviously, it's a strong yes. I've been highly anticipating this now for a long time. Maybe can you give an outlook on the short term? Let's say the proposal passes March 7th. The upgrade would take place on the 15th, if I'm not mistaken. And then, what is kind of like happening in that week after the proposal finishes? How do you think the upgrade works? And like, what are the next steps after that?
Yeah, so the upgrade, I think the upgrade will be smooth. The upgrade, the last upgrade was was actually smooth as well, except for like there was some issues with uppercase versus lowercase folders. But it should be pretty smooth. And then after that, the big thing that's going to happen is going to be the launch of Neutron. So their proposal. And then their launch. So that's going to be, there's going to be two things there. Is first of all, voting on it. We're working with the team actually to prepare some very detailed projections of what the revenue may be. So I think that the discussion and debate around whether it's worthwhile for the validators to run Neutron is going to be an interesting one. It's going to be the first time that the community is deciding whether a given consumer chain is worth it. Replicated security, that's important because there's a bar because the validators do have to run it, so you have to decide wisely. And then there's going to be the actual launch of the chain as well, and I think that should be pretty uneventful. We've done a bunch of consumer chains in a bunch of test nets, and they basically just run. One thing is it does cost. The one place where there may be friction is it does the way it works now is that there's a packet every block updating the validator set. And maybe in future versions it'll be possible to cut that down to make it less, less packets, but there'll be a packet every block. So that's, we'll just have to make sure the relayer stays funded and stuff. But yeah, I think other than that, consumer chains run separately as a separate chain. So they don't really impact, the hub itself at all. So it's not like an upgrade going live where, the entire code of the hub's being changed. It's a separate entity.
And what's your projection when Neutron is going live? Because as far as I understood, their code base is ready, so they're just waiting for the upgrade to happen, and then I guess probably wait 1 or 2 days for everything to run smooth. Or what's the current game plan?
Yeah, I think they do want to do it pretty soon after the upgrade goes live. I don't remember what the exact date is right now. But yeah, there isn't really a huge reason to wait. But yeah, we'll probably give it a week or something first. But yeah.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you so much, Gian, for all the insights. We also work on having a more in-depth live stream where everybody that listen now can drop questions under this video, so we can pick them up on the live stream. And also address some of the concerns, questions, right? There's so many things because this is brand new stuff. But yeah, thank you so much for explaining that, and happy voting, everybody.
All right. Bye bye.